Welcome to This Explainer. For generations, buying a home was just normal, a totally standard milestone. But today, millions of us look at the housing market and realize that dream is literally vanishing right in front of our eyes. We're going to break down the brutal economic factors that have completely shattered the traditional path to homeownership. Because let's be real, buying a home has morphed from a basic rite of passage into one of the absolute hardest financial challenges of modern life.
Step 1. Get a job. Step 2. Save money. Step 3. Buy a house. Step 4. Build a family. Right? That used to be the exact blueprint for adulthood. It was a linear, super predictable formula. Honestly, it wasn't necessarily easy, but it was reliable. If you put in the work, this sequence was your reward. It was basically the fundamental social contract.
But picture this. You're doing everything right today. You save for 5 years. You skip the vacations. You work the overtime. You put your head down, avoid unnecessary spending, and make all those tough, disciplined sacrifices just to finally save up for that standard down payment. You played entirely by the rules.
$100,000. You check the market, and boom! The house you've been aggressively budgeting for all these years suddenly costs an extra $100,000. In a flash, all those years of meticulous saving feel, well, absolutely meaningless. It's like the finish line wasn't just moved, it was strapped to a rocket and launched into space. And this gut punch? It's not just an isolated horror story.
Why does owning a house feel impossible today? This exact scenario is playing out for millions, and it forces us to ask this really urgent question. Why did our parents' generation have such a clear-cut path? And why do we feel so locked out right now? To figure that out, we have to look at shifting definitions, exploding metrics, and honestly, some hidden enemies.
The American dream. When a house represented more than just a place to live, it meant stability, security, independence, and wealth building. See, the whole definition of a home has shifted from an expected reality to a fading dream. For decades, a house wasn't just four walls and a roof. It was your primary vehicle for building wealth in society. Sure, it was an expensive purchase, but it was never considered completely unreachable.
Contrast the past, where one income supported a family and a home, with the present, where hard work just no longer guarantees home ownership. Back in the day, a single paycheck could realistically carry a mortgage and support a whole family. But today, that's almost unheard of. People are working full-time, holding down multiple side hustles, and still watching the edge of that cliff get further away. The math has completely decoupled from the actual effort you put in.
So did houses become more expensive, or did people become poorer? To really understand this massive reality gap, we have to ask that painful question. And unfortunately, the answer is both. It's a compounding crisis, basically squeezing the middle class in a vice from two totally different directions at the exact same time.
Exploding home prices versus stagnant wage growth. This is the core mathematical nightmare. Over the past few decades, home prices have aggressively exploded upward in almost every major city. Meanwhile, wage growth has just flatlined. Your income is already fighting for its life trying to keep up with basic survival, let alone these sky-high property values.
Running on a treadmill, working harder, saving more, yet falling behind. This creates such a crushing psychological burden for young workers today. It feels exactly like running on a treadmill that's cranked up to the absolute highest speed. You run faster, you save more, but mathematically, you're falling further behind every single year. The dream just gets slightly harder to reach with every passing month.
And then there's the hidden inflation effect. Construction costs increase, labor costs increase, land values increase, mortgage payments increase. Inflation doesn't just make your groceries more expensive, it quietly attacks every single component of housing. And since a house is the largest purchase you'll probably ever make, even a tiny inflationary bump creates massive, massive financial pressure across the board.
The mortgage trap. You qualify for the loan, but you can't live with the payment. Let's say you miraculously survive the inflation and actually scrape together that down payment. Welcome to the trap. Interest rates shoot up, and you find yourself in this completely bizarre reality where, sure, you technically qualify for the loan on paper, but you literally cannot survive the monthly payment in the real world. So, you're forced to wait.
But who are you actually competing against? While you're waiting on the sidelines, hoping for affordability to magically improve, the ground is shifting right under your feet. You really have to stop and ask yourself who you're up against, because there's a massive player in the game that everyday buyers don't even think about until they get outbid in all cash.
Ordinary buyers are looking for a place to live and build a family, versus investment funds looking for a financial asset and high returns. You're no longer just competing against other families who want a nice neighborhood with good schools. Housing has transformed into one of the most valuable asset classes on the planet. So while you're looking for a home, you're bidding against Wall Street funds looking at that exact same property as a high-yield financial asset. And that increased competition pushes prices even higher. Every day, people are forced into this incredibly unfair fight against corporate investors. You are literally competing against entities with endless capital. This relentless competition creates a steep uphill battle, continuously pushing prices further and further out of reach for the working and middle class.
Delayed life milestones. Marriage, children, moving out, long-term planning. This crisis doesn't just drain bank accounts, it dictates human lives. Millions are being forced to delay nearly every major life milestone. People are putting off getting married, delaying having kids, living with their parents way into adulthood, and just freezing their long-term plans. Because housing influences absolutely everything.
Losing access to a future you expected to have. When homeownership feels completely unreachable, you start to question your entire life trajectory. It breeds deep frustration, crippling anxiety, and total uncertainty. People aren't just losing access to a building made of wood and brick, they feel like they are being robbed of the very future they were promised.
The bigger reality of the crisis, broken affordability, stagnant wage growth, relentless inflation, and concentrated asset ownership. What this explainer really shows us is that we're looking at a massive systemic breakdown across the board. These basic life milestones are slipping away, even though people are arguably working harder than ever before.
Homeownership has gone from a natural next step to a distant goal. We've witnessed a profound societal shift here. What used to be just a natural next step in life has degraded into this distant, almost mythological goal. The basic optimistic question of, hey, which house should I buy, has been fundamentally stripped away from an entire generation. Will I ever be able to buy one at all? That optimism has been entirely replaced by this haunting reality. And until the deep systemic issues of stagnant wages, broken affordability, and relentless investor competition are actually resolved, this single question will continue to cast a dark shadow over our entire modern economy. So you have to wonder, what's going to break first, the market or the generations trying to buy into it?